Many are asking the same question: how do I deal with life pressures? There is no clear direction for my life. No matter what you are facing, no matter how difficult life may get, there is triumph over tragedy, hope out of your hopeless situation. No circumstance, however big or dark it seems, can stand against the miracles of God. Tune in and be encouraged as you discover the keys that unlock the doors to a life of freedom and joy. This is Life Beyond the Moment with Doug Stringer.
Welcome to Life Beyond the Moment with Doug Stringer. And I'm really excited that we have Jerry Lackey with me again this week, because I really felt like there were some things that we need to talk about. And last week we talked about a passion for a people and the unfolding of a vision. And you saw some incredible video footage of their 25-year anniversary in Botswana, Africa. But there's a process of unfolding that vision and the ability to look past your circumstances and to keep your eyes fixed on Jesus to fulfill that vision and leave a lasting legacy. So this week I want to talk about, with Jerry, the fingerprint of God, because there was a lot of fingerprints along the way that God gets all the glory, but in the midst of their most difficult of circumstances, they were able to look past their circumstance and see a God that was bigger than their circumstance. Jerry, great to have you back again today.
Yeah, good to be back today too.
Bless you, man. You know, we were talking offset a little bit, and last week was a great program, and thank you for being with us, and of course sharing your 25-year anniversary video. And I think it's important for people to go back and look at that if they can, and to be able to go online and find that video to look at it, to kind of get an idea of where we are today. We talked about a passion for people and the unfolding of a vision, but today I want to talk about the fingerprints of God, because that was really the last words you spoke on your 25-year anniversary video in Botswana, the fingerprints of God, and it's not the fingerprints of man. Tell a little bit about the journey. When you finally got there in the middle of the desert and took ground and began to believe God, and all you had was just bush. You didn't have anything, and yet 25 plus years later now, God has done incredible work. What was some of the process, and tell some of the stories that help you get to where you are today?
Well, you know, we have a lot of stories, and I think the first part of the journey was just showing up and being faithful, getting on the soil of Botswana, and just doing what we could with what we had, you know, right where we're at. Start, you know, where you're at. And from that, one of the first things we did was we wanted to leave something that would stay behind us and live beyond us. So we started, at that time it was Ngamiland Christian Academy. It's now Okavonga International School. It's become a widely known school up in the Ngamiland district.
Now I remember when I first went in the early 90s, I did a message for the kids at your school. You did? And it was called, Lord, Give Me Feet Like a Chicken.
Yes.
And you said to this day, some of those kids have grown up and remember that.
They do. And at that time, the school was housed in the old London Mission Society building, which is now close to 100 years old. Didn't know it at the time. You know, we had candlelight for the kids to study by because we didn't have electricity. It was, you know, humble beginnings. You know, just start where you're at with what you got and just, you know, go forward. And I found out later that the office that I office at actually had been used. You see, Livingston, Moffat were in Botswana. That office was used for the first translation of the Setswana Bible, which was really quite incredible that I had a chance to be a part of that history there. Right. But yeah, just starting where you're at, we've had, you know, lots and lots of encounters that could have been negative things, but when we take these journeys with God, we got to sign up for whatever comes along, and I've learned that everything that comes our way, it wasn't sent from God to discourage us, but God will take everything and use it to shape us. And I understand this, that the ministry is not as important. It's important because that's God's call in life, but it's not important as the process of us and our relationship with God on the journey. So when He invited us to do this thing in this country of Botswana, lots of lessons along the way. Just the spirit of perseverance, staying with it in the good times and the bad times, and just continually dreaming.
Well, you mentioned David Livingstone. And the great missionary to Africa, and in fact, Livingstone, Zambia is named after him.
Yes.
And such great stories. But I remember something he used to say. Why is it when an earthly king commissions us, we consider it an honor? But when the heavenly King commissions us, we call it a sacrifice.
Right. That's very
Talk
good.
about the understanding the core value of his relationship with God, that when God called him, it was an honor. So that every adversity that came did not stop him from fulfilling the vision God had given him. And the same I've seen and watched you and your wife, Jan, all these years, that passion for the beautiful people of Botswana, and no matter what adversity has come, you've been able to overcome them. And in the humanity, the frailty of our humanity, there's been times we get discouraged, but in the midst of that, you were able to encourage yourself in the faith, as King David was able to do, encourage one another in the faith, and to keep focus on what God's promises were.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes difficult times come our way, but thank God, the difficult times don't last. But people who carry vision and carry the heart of God can endure and can outlast any circumstance if we stay focused on the author and the finish of our faith. And I mean, that's the secret of our success, is just staying with it.
Now, what year was it when you first actually got into Botswana?
We came to Botswana in 1987 to kind of spy out the land. We came from we were probably the most unlikely people. You said Barbie and Ken, but really.
Yeah, last program I said that when they came to me and said, we want to go to Africa, to Botswana, and go there full time, I said, are you sure you don't want to just visit? Because you look like Ken and Barbie. I mean, you were successful in business and media here. It's like, are you sure you want to go?
Yeah, it was probably the most unlikely place for us to go. But we did go, and in the process of that, we went into the Kalahari Desert back in 1987 to spy out the land and try to find out, where do you want us to locate? What do you want us to do? And that's when we had a great encounter with some of the people living in remote areas. Really realized that there weren't many people doing much in those areas, and that had really become a cry of my heart. I think being in Jana was in some limelight ministry, in radio and some media things, as you mentioned. And for me, the cry of my heart was, God, send us where it's not popular. Send us, where we can make a difference. And that was really, as Jana said, that's a very dangerous prayer to pray.
And that's not today's linear Western thinking.
It's not.
Let's go where we can become big and successful in the eyes of man. But God doesn't look at doesn't measure success the way man does. God's looking for people like who just want to go out and tend to the sheep.
Yeah.
He says, now that person I can make into a king.
Yeah.
That person I can trust with the purposes of my kingdom.
Yeah. I think it's really just motives and issues of the heart. How can I remain a servant of God? And the awesome thing is when we stay humble, when we just stay, with God and His plans and purposes, God raises us up. And I would have never believed that, I barely got out of high school. Now, I did get some education later in life, but I barely got out of high school. And so when some of my classmates, where I went to school at, find out that I actually am the chairman of a very successful primary, secondary school, it's just almost unbelievable. Of all people to actually, have a school and operate a school.
And now all the way through Bible college.
Yeah, and on a Cambridge level, it's like, really? This guy? But
now, doesn't Cambridge University in the UK actually is connected with your schools in Botswana?
Well, we are a Cambridge testing center in Botswana, so they recognize us as a Cambridge testing center. And so, God will take the most unlikely people in the most unlikely situations and just do some pretty phenomenal things if we just allow Him to do that.
Well, I remember when you first got to Botswana, you kicked out baboons out of your house, you didn't have windows, no running water. And look what God has done. And I wish we could show the video again from last week, but to kind of just share where with nothing, through droughts and famines and through difficulty and to where you are today, this incredible facilities, church, schools, a place for kids, a place for a boarding school as well, and a place for abandoned children. You have all the life centers, you have all this stuff that God did out of nothingness. It was just in your heart and to serve God. And look what God has done. And today, though you went to a place where nobody else wanted to go, people were forgotten, in that place God has now given a legacy to His own name and glory through your lives, and all over the world people know about what you're doing.
It's been an awesome journey. Pretty incredible.
Now, one time you called, and I remember John Osteen gave you a really incredible word. He called you, the late John Osteen. And there had been an explosion. You lost everything. A
pastor to pastors, Brother John Osteen, Pastor John Osteen, at the time when I was really probably at one of the greatest challenges in my life. We had just, after 10 years, we lived in tents in the early years, just really pioneering difficult. We finally had moved to buy a piece of property, begin to start the vision of what is now there today. On July 17th, 1997, the house, we were at the school that I talked about earlier, and we saw smoke coming from far off in the bush, and someone had come and said, your house is burning. No fire trucks, no way, we're in a little dusty village. And so I said, Jana, just prepare yourself. So we drive through the bush, get there, and all of our house, 10 years of work, everything that we had been blessed and had accumulated was actually incinerated in a matter of moments. And so we were back at nothing,
And to make matters worse, there had been rumors that it had been sabotaged.
Oh yeah, there was lots of rumors. People say, I think someone, arsoned your house, or maybe you burned the house down yourself and to collect insurance money, which wouldn't have been a plan except for we didn't have any insurance, and we had invested a lot in the property already and had lost all that. But for what we lost, as we talked about last week, God gave it back 100-fold.
But in the midst of that, when you could have said, we're out of here, we've invested 10 years, you got a phone call from quite a few people, but also the late John Osteen.
In the midst of where we don't have a place to live, so God bless the Southern Baptists. They gave us one of the little missing houses as a one-room house, and we're staying in that. We're sort of shell-shocked from the fire, and just trying to get well. And we don't have anything in the house. We just had to go out and buy the children, some new shoes and a few things to get started with. And then our Baptist missionaries, they come next door and they say, hey, there's an international phone call for you. So I go and answer the phone, and it's Brother John Osteen on the phone. And as soon as I hear his voice, in a low point in my life, I just begin to weep, because that's the power of a pastor, just the heart of a pastor. 10,000 miles away, and I didn't know it, but at the time he was actually, I think, on kidney dialysis himself in a hospital. But he reached out to me as a missionary, as a member of his church, and he began to tell me the story. Brother Osteen, I'm weeping, and he says, well, Jerry, Renee, my secretary has told me about your fire. He said, let me tell you a story. I know you may not want to hear this, but just listen. So, okay. So he tells this wonderful story, which has been told many times. He said there was a man on an island who was shipwrecked, and he had used all that he had and had sourced some resources to try to build this little shanty to get out of the elements, and he had got it finished, and all of a sudden, he was there on the island for many, many months, and lightning came, struck the little shelter and burned it to the ground. And so he was shaking his fist at God and saying, God, why has this happened? Now I have nothing. And at the same time, he hears a voice from across the other part of the island, and they're saying, hey, you over there, we've come to rescue you. So he runs and he says, I don't understand. How did you find me? I've been here for months and months. They said, we saw the smoke from your fire. And so Brother Osteen said, God has seen the smoke from your fire. How can I help you? Do you want a one-way ticket or a round-trip ticket? I want to bring you home and get you healthy. And so we said, well, we want a round-trip ticket. Maybe I'll write a book sometime called Round-Way Ticket,
There's a lot of books that we need to write, because there's so many stories, Jerry, that you and Jana, and I've been there twice to visit with you. My wife's been there, my daughter, for the 25-year anniversary. But there's so many stories along the way. One time, Janet was telling me that I talked to you about this by phone from Botswana here, and I was in Houston. And you talked about a time in the early days that you had an old beat-up truck, and it broke down, or you're
Old Faithful.
Old Faithful.
Yeah.
And you came up to a river, and there was no way to cross the river. And you were saying, God.
At those times, I was a very young missionary, and what would be not scary for me today was quite a big thing then. And my old Land Cruiser had about 1 million kilometers on it, and we called it Old Faithful just to make sure we could get there and back. And yeah, it had broken down, and I was faced with the challenge of crossing a little river in the village of Matopi, and it was the Boteti River. And the water, it was early in the morning, and I was contemplating, as a young missionary, all kinds of things were running around in my mind. There's crocodiles in the river. I didn't know, and to me as an American and a young missionary, everything was going to take me out. And so crocodiles in the river, and I was sitting there praying, contemplating, now God, in order for me to get home, I've got to get across this river. I guess if I have to take my, my clothes off and swim across the river, because it was cold out too, I didn't want to walk in wet clothes, then that's what I'll do. And just as I was about to, think about doing that, I hear the rattle of an old truck coming, and this wonderful, beautiful old man from the village comes in his old beat-up truck, and he stops and he greets me, and I tell him who I am, and in the translation I find out that his name is Moses. Of all things, translate his name is Moses. And so he puts me in his truck and he drives me across the river, in his truck, and the water's part and takes me to the other side.
So part of this Red Sea.
Yeah. And so, God's provision in the wilderness, if we'll just dare to trust God in the extreme circumstances and just in the everyday simple circumstances,
Yes.
whether it be in the city or in the bush, whatever, God is faithful and He's going to make a way where there seems not to be a way.
And you might have been a young American missionary, but even as an older person, when I started coming down there to visit, and of course in Zambia and Zimbabwe and Botswana,
Right.
I was asked to do a baptism in the Zambezi River. And I said, "Are you sure there's no crocodiles?" And, "Oh, no, it's too shallow here for the crocodiles." People were waiting in line for me to baptize them, right? So I get in the water and I just take one more look around, and sitting across, not too far away, was this huge, looked like a big log, but it was a crocodile looking at me like, I'm waiting to chomp on this Japanese-American meat here.
Right.
I'm thinking, if this is too shallow, what is that,
We've baptized many people in the rivers just like that. And one thing for sure is people are real. If they're going to get in the water and you're going to get in the water, you want to make sure it's the real deal.
That's right.
That's for sure.
That's right. I thought about doing a chapter in one of my books, and you probably should add it, and I'm sure it'll be in one of yours. But your wife and Remick, your oldest son, had gone to visit somebody, pray for somebody at the Maun hospital, or what you call it, a hospital or a clinic. So, and there was a little baby in there that for, I guess, 3 months had been there because they didn't have a place to drop off children. And the story was, correct me if I'm wrong, was that a mother had left this baby, a newborn, by the river, and the crocodiles could have eaten it, but there was a dog that kept barking and drawing attention, and a policeman came and found the baby abandoned, and I call that the miracle angel dog.
Yeah.
Because usually that dog would be eaten by crocodiles too, but it was barking, causing commotion, and basically protected that baby. And that baby was there was no place to take the baby, it was abandoned, but the nurses of the clinic was taking turns as they came on shift to take care of the baby. And your son Remick said something to your wife, and today...
Yeah, well, that story is so close to my heart because today that story, in conclusion, is now my daughter, my beautiful, beautiful African daughter, who's 10 years old today, and so beautiful, so talented, so gifted, and she makes every day Christmas for our family, and we're so blessed to have her in our lives. And yeah, it was a tragic story. Things like that do happen, but thank God that He sends people to rescue. And I know sometimes people say, well, to my daughter, well, you're really fortunate. And we always feel like we're really fortunate, because you came into our life, and what a gift from God in our life. But yeah, my wife had gone into the hospital because we were going to visit another pastor's whose wife had just had a baby. And Janice says in the maternity ward, "Is this the so-and-so baby?" And she goes, "No, this is a little girl who was found by the river. Don't you want to take her home?" Well, of course, they were just teasing with her. There was a lot of procedure in that to happen. But yeah, today she is our beautiful daughter. And through her life and other situations, God began to speak to Janice's heart about birthing Lerato House, which is now a rescue center for abandoned and children.
And because of this, now out of this tragedy, we have great triumphs, and it's really helped change some of the laws of the nation. Yeah,
to a certain degree, they're doing some things because some of the laws had not been changed for a long time, since the early '60s, and so they're doing some reform on that.
So in the past, a person, if they didn't have any other alternative, they'd leave their babies.
Not necessarily. No, I think Botswana, what's happened in Botswana is through the years, within the culture, beautiful culture in Botswana, and there was always extended families. So everybody would care for children as they were their own. But just in the last, probably the last 10, 15 years, one could never know what desperation was in the heart of this mother, and one would never want to judge her for what she did, because I have no idea, what could have been going on in her life to bring at this point. But all I know is that in that, the intervention of God was there, and Mapula, my daughter, wound up in my life and Jana's life and our children's life.
And she's a blessing to all of us.
In fact, her name, Mapula, in Setswana, actually means Lady Rain, because rain is considered highly favorable and a blessing in a desert region, and it means one who brings blessings.
Wow.
So
she's been your daughter now since the time she was just a newborn.
3 months old, yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Praise the Lord. And of course, we've had the pleasure of having her in our home, and our daughter becoming friends with Mapula, and of course, my daughter enjoyed going down to visit with her as well during your anniversary.
She and Ashley had a great time, and actually it was so wonderful to have your wife with us during the 25-year ceremony.
Right. Now, the Loreto House, though, came birthed out of this need that if a person wanted to bring their children, or if there was a need, that they can bring them to places like the Loreto House.
It's a rescue center, and we work hand in hand with government. It's basically just at a rescue center where if there are situations where children need help, then they're able to come and stay until such a time as till the government finds a place and places them within the country.
So in the dynamic, I remember the drawing that you did, and I have in a plaque in a frame at my office. It was just a concept of this full vision. You had a passion for the people, but God began to unfold a vision.
Yeah.
And we see fingerprints along the way of God in the midst of a place that others maybe hadn't invested in, but God called you to.
Yeah.
And today is on the map. Around the world, people know of the beautiful people of Botswana. They know what you guys are doing through Jerry and Janet Lackey Ministries and Love Botswana Outreaches. And of course, you have always walked in humility, but God has really gone before you and giving you favor in so many areas, from government to the people, and you've got a church there. What are all the dynamics that have come to fruition in 25 years?
Right.
That now you have the Bible school, the boarding school, the Loreto House, you have so many things.
Yeah. Women's empowerment programs, Reach for Life, an abstinence program taken into all the schools, an award system for children, that young people coming up. A lot of things that were all part of the vision, really, because what we're doing is trying to raise African leaders, and so we do that through a lot of different ways. But
now, didn't you have a Miss Botswana?
We did,
a part of your ministry?
One of the former Miss Botswana. She's actually still a member of our church today and sings in our praise team. Juby Peacock, she's a blessing to us. And God has given us favor in tremendous ways. But I always say this, and for any Africans that might be watching this telecast, I have to say this as an American grafted in. I feel like I'm a Matewana now because I've been in Ngami land for a long time. I would say this as strongly as I can. For Jan and I, we could never give to the nation of Botswana what Botswana has given to us. I say that because, a lot of times we go with the syndrome that we're going to go and change things and do things, and yeah, God does that. But the beauty of the culture of Botswana and Africa as a whole, Africa, the West could learn so much about the strong cultural values of Africa. And we've been blessed, and we have probably gained more in our life than we ever have or ever could give back to the country. And so we're just grateful to have been play a small part in even the development up in the Northwest District, and to be able to take hands with. We've got incredible national people who've taken hands with us, and right now Pastor Gary Potsueo and Stacy and some of our leadership team, they're doing such a tremendous job of now running with the vision. We begin to now nationalize, and those national leaders have been brought up, and now they've caught the vision, they're running with it, and they're doing a far better job than Jan and I ever could do.
I remember in the last program we talked about the battle you had with stage 4 cancer, and the day after your chemotherapy, you and I were on a plane to go back for your camp meetings, and pastors came from all over, in fact from other countries as well, but from the bush. And just when you landed I remember landing in Maun, Botswana, and we'd gone through Johannesburg, and people waiting outside the airport to see Papa Jerry.
Yeah.
And they were so blessed to
That's
see
pretty
you.
sweet.
And that just goes to show that to them, your family.
Yeah.
And you may be an American on the outside, but you've
Yeah.
captured the heart of Africa, and they know that, and you've become friends, and they really have a high regard for you. I just watch the endearment that they have for you and their love
Yeah.
for you.
Well, they're very special people, and we are blessed to have had a part in them, and to be ambassadors, to come and just represent God and to be, carriers of the vision. It's God's heart. It's not our idea. I think if it was my vision, we could have probably done some different things that would have failed, but thank God we've stayed true to the vision of God in the country.
And the best is yet to come.
Best is yet to come.
Amen.
Yeah.
What an honor to have been a friend of yours all these years and to serve with you and to still serve on your board. And I really am looking forward to the years ahead. They'll be far greater than all the years before.
Likewise, you've been such a dear friend and just, family to us through the years. And Turning Point, Somebody Cares, have reached out and blessed us in many ways, not only with the offices, but just being a board member for all these years. You know our history. We've talked about it, and so I agree. We agree that our best years are yet to come for both you and for me.
And part of the reason I'm married to my wonderful wife and have my wonderful daughter is because Jerry and Janet finally got me and says, if you don't get serious with her, you'll never get married. Okay. And so Ashley and my wife Lisa were able to go for the 25-year anniversary together for Love Botswana and to celebrate with you all.
And it's a good thing you waited, because you got a good one.
I got a good one. It says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, and we used the scripture last week, that we look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross and the shame, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. But for today's program, I want you to consider verse 3. Consider him, being Jesus, who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, or adversities, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. Really, the fingerprint of God is that in the midst of your most difficult of circumstances, keep the passion that God's put in your heart. Keep the things that he's given to you to accomplish, and he will unfold the vision. And in the midst of your most difficult of circumstances, you'll be able to remember that God's still with you. He hasn't forgotten you. He has a plan greater than the moment that you're going through. Just like with Jerry and Janet, there was all kinds of situations that could have discouraged them along the way and knocked them out of their calling. But because they knew the fingerprint of God was on their life, they fixed their eyes on Jesus, they were encouraged in the Lord, and today have this incredible ministry that is touching the nations of the world because something in their heart has a beautiful passion for the beautiful people of Botswana that is now reaching that nation, but also all over Africa and around the world. Thank God for the tenacity and the perseverance that they lived by, but that could only come because of their passion for God and their compassion for souls. God has a great vision and purpose for your life. Keep your passion for him. He will develop a vision, unfold it, and you'll leave a lasting legacy to the glory of God.
We pray that you are encouraged and blessed by today's program. This program is supported by viewers like you. If you would like more information or to support the ongoing ministry of Doug Stringer and Somebody Cares, please go to www.somebodycares.org.